have a chance to visit with in this new year. We're going to kick off this webinar series, first of all, with a little bit of technical information. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Christy Short, who is the director at the Texas Success Center, who will help us with that. Christy.
Hi, everybody. It looks like some folks are still filtering in. So thank you so much for joining us today. This webinar is set up a little differently than some of the other meetings that you have attended on Zoom. So this is a webinar, which means that unlike a meeting, you do not have audio and video controls. So you will be seeing videos of our panelists and presenter and host today, but not of all the attendees. If you have questions, please type those into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a bar that has Q&A with a couple little comment bubbles. That's where you should type in your questions, and we'll address those questions at the end of the webinar. If you would like to give a comment to the fellow attendees or to the presenters, then you will see that there's also a chat function. And if you use the drop down, you can send the chat to various people. You can send them to the individual panelists just to say, hi, good to see you if you like, or choose panelists and attendees to send a message to everyone like, good afternoon all. So I think that that's it for the technical. So remember, put your questions in the Q&A and then we will address those at the end of the webinar. So I'll turn it back over to Dr. Cynthia Ferrell.
Thank you so very much. So thank you so very much for being here today, trustees and CEOs. This webinar series is new this year, and it's going to continue through this semester. So it will end in May with monthly webinars, and it is a collaborative effort between TAC, the Texas Success Center, and the Community College Association of Texas Trustees. And so to get us kicked off on this very first webinar, I've asked the chair of CAT, Ms. Carol Scott, to welcome us. She's also the chair at the Del Mar College Board. So Carol, please, words of welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferrell. And let me add my wishes for a happy new year and for health and prosperity and success for all of us. Welcome to this first professional development session of 2021. As Dr. Ferrell said, sponsored by the Community College Association of Texas Trustees and the Texas Success Center Board of Trustees Institute. We're delighted that you could join us this afternoon. The CAT Education Committee, chaired by Danny Gertson of Wharton Junior College and Bonnie Nahara of El Paso Community College, have led the effort over the last 10 months as we have moved our trustee leadership series and other CAT professional development into these virtual platforms. I know that we are all ready to get back to in-person sessions and networking and probably quite a few hugs when we finally get a chance to see each other again in person. If you're interested in getting more involved in CAT, then we'd like to ask you to maybe think about joining one of our committees. We've got committees involved in education, engagement, advocacy, and resource development. And with our newly adopted strategic plan, we are off and running for this biennium. So again, thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Ferrell.
Thank you, Carol, appreciate that. So we also have on the webinar, Dr. Manny Gonzalez, who is the director for CAT here at the Texas Association of Community College. I welcome him, and just note that he will be hosting next month's webinar that I hope you all will register for. So then I just have one more greeting to share. Our boss here at TAC, Jacob Friday, is unable to be with us today. His wife has an opportunity to get vaccinated, and so he is now transferring her to El Paso in order to get her shot. So I'm happy for them, but he sends his regards that he misses being able to be with you and wishes you a successful webinar, hoping that this is useful to you and your boards. So with that, then we'll start this first webinar. It seems so appropriate that we dedicate today's first webinar to the role of the board in setting the college's strategic direction for student success. And so with this webinar, we will offer trustees and your CEOs an opportunity to share and learn ways to envision a successful future for your students. And in this webinar, we will be reviewing vision statements and statements of student success that other boards have used in order to focus their colleges around being the best college they can for their students. So before we get to our special guest who will jump into that topic, I wanted to set the stage and the context and tell you a little bit about the center and what our mission is and how the Board of Trustees Institute fits into that. And so, because I know that there are some on the line who have been veteran BOTIers since the very beginning. This started in 2007. But I also know that there are trustees on the line who maybe are not even familiar with the center nor with our Board of Trustees work. And so I'll just give a little bit of introduction on that. And so while TAC is more than 75 years old, the Success Center is only 5 years old. And we were started to come alongside the community colleges to help support your student success efforts. And so, you know, Texas has a long history of student success efforts. The Texas Success Center, though, is dedicated to the social and economic mobility, and we support community college strategies to help empower Texans to rise out of poverty and to achieve better life outcomes. And even though we had this sort of mission and vision statement prior to COVID, it is no more relevant than it is today, that our students so very much need our Texas community colleges as the engine for economic recovery and for getting people back to work. And so I wanted to show you this next slide, how we have organized our work around many different efforts that have been going on for some time. And so while the print is a little bit small on this screen, it's really to help illustrate a concept of what the center has been doing. So this is a picture of all the different student success efforts and other statewide projects that have brought us to the place we are now. And so you see on the top in the purple line, there are several different statewide reports and strategic plans that have guided our work in higher ed, starting with Closing the Gaps in 2000, and even up to our own 60 by 30 Texas that we are operating under now, and that TAC has a new business advisory council to help support our new workforce initiative. And then along the bottom, the other book in the red, where it shows the different ways that we have grown collectively around the ways that we collect and use data. And as we have matured through all these different strings of student success efforts, it seemed kind of chaotic until you plot it like this, because we had some colleges participating in certain student success efforts like Achieving the Dream or Student Success by the Numbers and the different initiatives that we had going on. We had other colleges who were not participating in statewide, but they were maybe participating in national efforts. Some were receiving grant awards from philanthropy and some were not. And so really with the Success Center, we brought this effort to say, we want to bring cohesion to the student success effort in Texas, and we want all 50 community colleges to be involved. If you could move to the next slide, please. This is our major strategy that we're bringing that coherence under. So the Texas Pathway Strategy is a framework for bringing all the different initiatives together. And so you see there that this is a systemic transformation that we're asking colleges to come together to create at their colleges by focusing on students' end goals. So students' end goals of good careers and further education. And so what we do is we start there and we backwards map to the students themselves. So in the blue in the middle, you see these are the categories of essential practices that we've been promoting with your colleges, that to get to a good career, the student needs to be successful and earning credentials and certificates. And they progress. We look at how they enter, how we're connecting to those students. And then in the green box to the left, you see that we're trying to expand our thinking of who students are. And many times we typically think about a high school student who matriculates into our colleges, but we're really expanding that. Colleges are already producing 92% of all of the CTE in Texas. And so we're expanding our rhetoric and our Texas Pathways work to make sure that we're including adults, those who are unemployed or underemployed, so that we can get them reskilled and upskilled and back to work. So that's our Texas Pathway Strategy. And the way the center supports the colleges is through institutes and the Board of Trustees Institute. And in those institutes, we promote these 4 pillars of the essential practices of Texas Pathways. Mapping pathways to student end goals, helping students choose and enter a program pathway, keeping students on a path, and ensuring that students are learning are the categories of the different essential practices that we promote and help your colleges with. Many of you have been doing this work with us. I know that many of you have even approved strategic plans that include the guided pathways, essential practices, and are far along in that work. And so every community college except one, if you flip to the next slide, has committed to not only promoting these essential practices in their colleges, but have begun to work to scale that work. And so it's not about having your developmental ed, for example, having a lot of innovation, but it's about having the entire college bring those essential practices to all students who can benefit from them. I want to show you a little bit of data as we move forward about whether or not this is making a difference. So if you'll flip the slide, please. You see here that I'm going to tell you about some early momentum measures and across time. So the coordinating board has been very gracious in giving us these key performance indicators that we share with the colleges at the institutes. And so you can see these sets of data along the bottom that this is years 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 for each of these 4 categories of race and ethnicity. So just for a frame of reference, 13, 14, 15 early days, right? This is more sort of achieving the dream days for those of you who were working with that. We started Texas Pathways in 2017, so you probably wouldn't expect a lot of difference there. 2018, then some colleges were further along, some are just getting on the path to scaling guided pathways. And so we're just beginning to see the very first impact of the work. And I assume that as we move into 2020, 2021 data, we're going to see even more dramatic improvements. So what you're looking at in front of you here is that more students are earning 15 credits or more in their first year. And so you can see that across each one of these groups of students, there's improvement. Now this is statewide data. So we're talking about 750,000 students who are represented here. So the good news is every one of these groups are increasing over time. And we continue that increase during Texas Pathways days. The bad news is that African-American students not only started lower than everyone else, but even their tallest bar is shorter than the Hispanic, their tallest bar is shorter than Hispanic and whites' shortest bar, right? So we're still need to continue our closing the gaps type conversations and really looking at data like this to monitor student success. I want to show you another set of data on this next slide. More students during guided pathways years are completing their first college level math course. So this is if they had to take developmental ed, that they completed all of that, and they have completed their first college level math course, whatever that might be. So you know that in developmental ed, we've moved to co-requisites. So there's an expectation that if we do this right, and this was the right thing to do, we ought to see more dramatic increases in successful completion of a college level math course in the first year. So again, these are years 2013 to 2018, and it's broken into these 4 groups of race and ethnicity. Did they complete their college level math course in the first year? Good news is every one of them are an upward trajectory and a significant bump in the 2018 year. So this is good signs that we're going to have good data coming in the coming years. Bad news, again, African-American students there on the left are lower than all of the other groups. So more closing the gaps needing to happen both in African-American and Hispanic students, but specifically for African-American students. If you could go to the next slide, and actually, Christy, I'm going to skip this one and go to the next one in the interest of time. Yes, here's my last one then. More students are completing their college level reading, writing, and math class in the first year. So this is 3 college level classes that students are completing in their very first year of college. It's a reading intensive course, a writing intensive course, and their first college level math course. Are they completing all 3 of those in their first year? Again, this is 4 groups of students across the same years. Same good news, bad news scenario, right? We see increases across all ethnicities. We see a significant jump in 2018 data, so the tall green line on the right-hand side, and again, African-American and Hispanic students trailing behind white student success. So that's sort of the backdrop of what we are looking at as we go into guided pathways and we commit ourselves to this good work of really being the best colleges we can for our students. And with that, then I'm going to say this is the backdrop that I invite you into this conversation with trustees. We have this Board of Trustees Institute, as I said. It's an annual event where trustees come together. They look at data like this together. They have good conversations. We have coaches. Generally, when we were meeting face to face, they would have coaches with them, and they would have team time where a CEO could sit with a couple of trustees and really talk about data and think about what they might want to do to improve their institutions. And at the end of this three-day event where they come away to talk about student success, every college leaves with a set of action plans of what they want to do when they get back home, that these trustees want to have conversations with the rest of the trustees on their board to think about things that they might want to change when they get home. So with that, then I'm going to turn the webinar over to Dr. Martha Ellis. Dr. Ellis is the Managing Director at the Charles A. Dana Center. She was formerly the Vice Chancellor of Community College Partnerships at the UT system. And she was formerly the President of Lee College and of TSTC Waco. She now serves as a Pathways coach for us here at the center. And she is also the Senior Pathways lead for us at the center. So enjoy working with Martha Ellis, and I'm going to turn the podium over to her now.
Thank you, Cynthia, just in time, right? Thank you. It's so exciting to see the progress that's being made on all of your colleges. So thanks for sharing that data. Today, we're here to explore the development and implementation of statements of strategic direction for student success. So I have panelists from 3 colleges, and each college has a little different insight on the topic. I will introduce the panelists along with their strategic direction for student success statement. And while I'm asking questions of the panelists, I encourage you to post your questions for the panelists by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom that Christy referenced, so that we will be able to respond to your questions after we finish our conversation together with each of the panelists. So with that, let me introduce our panelists and the colleges. So the first is Kilgore College. Kilgore College provides a learner-centered environment that focuses on student access, success, and completion via collaborative partnerships. And our panelists are Dr. Brenda Kays, who's the president at Kilgore College, and Joe Carrington, who is the chair of the board of Kilgore College. Our second college is Alamo College District, and the Alamo colleges will be the best in the nation in student success and performance excellence. They go on to define student success as providing academic and student support and align labor market-based pathways with a focus on student access, completion, and social mobility. Our panelists from Alamo are Dr. Mike Flores, the Chancellor, and Vice Chair of the Board, Joe Alderete Jr. Our third college, San Jacinto College, will advance the social and economic mobility of all members of our community. We will be known for our excellence in teaching and learning, our intentional student-centered support, and our commitment to every student. We'll be the preferred workforce and economic development partner in the region and a champion for lifelong learning. San Jacinto College will inspire students to explore opportunities, define their educational and career paths, and achieve their goals and dreams. Our panelists from San Jacinto College are Dr. Brenda Hellyer, the Chancellor, and Chair of the San Jacinto College District Board, Marie Flickinger. So with that, I would like to ask our panelists questions, and we're going to start with Dr. Kays and Chair Carrington. Kilgore College has recently received a number of awards and grants for your student success work. A couple of years ago, I know the trustees at Kilgore College had a board workshop and student success on student success and guided pathways. And out of that workshop and additional meetings came the board's vision and direction for student success. So will you explain to us the process and strategies used by the Kilgore trustees to set up that strategic direction, why it was important to establish the direction, and how has this vision guided your strategy and direction for the college? Dr. Kays, Chair Carrington.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Dr. Ellis, and good afternoon, everyone. And regarding your questions, Dr. Ellis, after the workshop, we decided to refocus on student success a couple of years ago, as you said, and through that workshop, some additional meetings, we become more grounded in the concepts of student success work, including what guided pathways is, what it means, and became much more familiar with Kilgore College's data. We didn't shy away from what the data said. You know, it's not always going to be good at the first glance of it. We didn't sugarcoat it, but we also recognized our strengths. So as a result of that foundation that was built, we established the student success policy that we adopted in February 2019 to send a clear message to the entire college community that the board expects a focus on student success that drives everything that we do. And I'm going to let Dr. Kay speak to the policy itself a little bit.
Thank you, Chair Carrington. Good afternoon, everyone. You can tell by Joe's comments thus far that Kilgore College has a phenomenal board. You do not have to spend much time talking to our trustees to really get a clear picture that the student is the most important person at this organization. So our policy that the board developed was actually what I would call a capstone. Now, it's not the ending. I expect even bigger and better things to come from the board as they continue the student success journey in tandem with the organization. But I'd like to give you some elements that actually led to the policy being established. In 2016, the Board of Trustees adopted a committee structure, and prominent in that structure, they established a student success committee. Additionally, they added a student success data spotlight that has become a standing agenda item for every meeting. The board also revised the college mission statement to emphasize that access, success, and completion are core elements and core directives at the organization. They adopted a new strategic plan with the overarching theme of its pillars, emphasizing the importance of student learning and success. In 2017, the college began its official Guided Pathways journey, and the board provided for sufficient resources in the annual budget to fund board member attendance and participation at the BOTI institutes. Regular BOTI attendance has spurred the student success policy and the implementation of a half-day board retreat that focuses on student data organized around the Guided Pathways pillars. The success scorecard reflects also elements from completion by design, which was a forerunner to the current Guided Pathways pillars. I think that the policy statement really sums it up well. Emphasizing a learner-centered culture, and this is exactly coming from the policy as printed, the board decrees that student success will be Kilgore College's prime directive. This policy actively shifts the board and the college from an at all cost contact our generation culture to a culture where the emphasis is instead placed upon student outcomes-based success. Measures to include completion, retention, and graduation. This policy is a decree to do the right thing for the right reason for students. And in order to accomplish the college's prime directive, the following tenets will be utilized to shape the culture and practices employed by faculty and staff for the benefit of students. A culture of caring and radical hospitality. An environment where faculty and staff embrace the student that they have instead of focusing on the student that they wish they had. A definite focus on student outcomes, including an examination of data. A directive that specific points of data, namely course completion, retention, and graduation rates, will be presented, analyzed, and discussed at every board meeting. A culture that is based in equity via the evaluation of disaggregated student data, employing strategies designed to benefit all students. Safety nets will exist to help students overcome resource insecurities, and the college will research and adopt proven best practices. As you can tell from those tenets, there shouldn't be any question in anybody's mind exactly what the board expects from this institution in support of our students. And so, Joe, did you want to talk a little bit more about how that policy has shaped some of the work moving forward?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Case. As she mentioned, the policy, the scorecard, that helps the board visualize and evaluate how we're doing under the student success work, and additionally to the student success spotlight. As far as the way the board's vision is implemented, it's implemented on a daily basis through the work of the Student Success Council. We have annual data summits that gets us familiar with the current data that the faculty and staff are sharing real-world best practices for improving student success. Plus, a gigantic step is specific working groups have tackled the conversion to an 8-week semester terms and improving the student experience. All laser focus on helping students be more successful. And Dr. Kays uses that term laser focus many, many times during board meetings. With multiple higher education opportunities within a 50-mile radius, you have to stand out to attract students. While we are clear that we're not chasing enrollment, it's not our priority, we feel that the natural offshoot of helping more students be successful is the ability to attract new students and retain current students, thus increasing our tuition revenue. With increased student enrollment, success comes with other benefits as well. Our graduates will be more attractive to employers, and local communities can tout the strength of our educational programs and efforts to attract new businesses. We've already gotten attention from state and national funders who want to invest in KC's efforts. We recently got a $750,000 grant to offer free tuition to students. These accrued benefits not only contribute to the long-term sustainability of the college, but also have tremendous positive impacts on our local community in the state of Texas.
I think that the work, thank you, Chair Carrington. I think the work that's being done at the institution would not necessarily have the buoyancy that it has without the wonderful support of the Board of Trustees. I want to tell you that in 2017, the college conducted an institutional effectiveness survey, similar to many of our colleagues across the state. But one of the comments that was actually noted on that institutional effectiveness survey was, student success is a vacuous term. I can't tell you how far we have traveled since we received that response from a member of our institution. I think that thanks to the board's effort, we've come a long way, and we have clearly defined and communicated what student success is and what it looks like. As we continue to track our data, I'm so proud of the work of our faculty and staff at this organization. You've seen a little bit of it illustrated with Dr. Ferrell, but it continues to take my breath away with regards to the great work that they're doing and how that is paying off for our students. I'd also like to thank Dr. Ferrell and her staff for everything that the Student Success Center does in terms of attracting funders who can help all of the colleges across the state actually achieve the kind of outcomes that we've seen here at KC and that you're about to hear from our colleagues. We really appreciate it. It's helped so much, and we can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you both so much for telling the story of Kilgore College. We now move to Alamo College District. Dr. Flores and Vice Chair Alderete, Alamo colleges have received national recognition for improvement in student success outcomes as a district, and also individual colleges within your district have received awards. How did the trustees design the original vision for student success and guided pathways, and how does this vision impact the strategic goals, budget, and policies approved by the Board of Trustees?
Do I start off here, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll tell you how it started. It started with an awful lot of discussion. It started with some very serious discussion about what our role was, and obviously we're policymakers. But the discussion also shifted in my term, which has been 10 years, from discussing buildings and budgets to student success. And that, I think, was the critical turning point at the Alamo colleges, because all of a sudden we had to pay attention. Now, please understand, I am not an educator. I spent 8 years in city government. So every meeting I came to with the coordinating board's almanac with all that data. And that's where my questions came from. Not as an educator, not as, I didn't have history in education or anything like that. But I started asking questions, why aren't we doing better? And we started driving down into the various issues. And I've got to tell you, our staff, at that time, Dr. Bruce Leslie, and now that's continued with Dr. Mike Flores, has really started to listen to some of the concerns that the board has had. The issue was that if our students weren't graduating or they weren't receiving workforce certification, where are we failing our students? And that's the way we looked at it. And not only the students who succeeded did we applaud, we wanted to know those students that failed and what happened to them. And why does it continue happening to them? So these goals that we set forth, the Alamo way, always inspire and stuff like that, that's the frosting on the cake. Those are the candles on the cake. The cake is the real work. That's what holds up the frosting and the candles. That's where we got together with our team. I'm going to repeat that again. Our team, because it's a matter of the board working through our chancellor, in this case, Dr. Mike Flores, and telling them what we see the concerns are and what we hear the concerns are. Mike will tell you I'm a very active board member. My student trustees, ever since we had a student trustee, I always gave them my cell number and my email number to be distributed to any student that needed help, period. Not so that I could intervene, but so that I could pass on to our team, hey, we've got a problem here. It's not for me to resolve as a board member, but somewhere in the team, we need to fix this up. Because those students that fail are really the measurement. The ones that succeed, we all know where they go. But the ones who fail are the real measurement of how good a job we're doing. And I got to tell you, the plan that we've laid out and the implementation of that plan, Dr. Mike Flores and his team have done an exemplary job. Now, even though we're doing an exemplary job, every single day, I breathe and eat the Alamo colleges every day. Dr. Flores can attest to that. But it's about caring for the students every single day, about understanding where the problems are, what they're wrong. We have an advocacy program that when we won the Baldrige Award, had every single director from the Baldrige Award in tears, what we were doing for our students above and beyond. Diapers, dresses, extra cash they needed, what food, you name it. That was done by our team. And that's what we've tried to develop, was that image. Baldrige was not won by the board. Baldrige was not won by our chancellor. It was won by our team, everybody, from the custodial staff all the way across to the board. And that's how I've seen my role. And I've just approached it from my governmental background of trying to take care of citizens' needs, no matter what it might be. So I looked at the entire horizon of need. That's the way I've tried to apply it. I'll turn it over to Mike or whatever direction we're going now, but that's just the way I am as a board member.
I think thank you, Mr. Alderete. I think Mr. Alderete and our trustees, really the seminal moments or seminal pieces of policy that he mentioned in particular, one of those is B91, which is the Alamo Way. With that, it provides us with 3 tenets or foci. So performance excellence, student success, and then principle-centered leadership. So, and then those 3 are actually linked then to frameworks that we utilize. So student success is linked to achieving the dream, and as part of that, also our work jointly with the trustees on BOTI that was mentioned earlier. Performance excellence to the Baldrige framework, and then principle-centered leadership is linked to Alamo Leads in our work with badging and providing individuals or students with leadership opportunities. that really allows us the superstructure for success for the organization. So policymakers working, our trustees working with our team, our 5,000 faculty and staff, to back up 69,000 students this term to be successful. And then the way we effectuate that, the way that we could have gone from, in 2015, 4.6 years for the average graduate, to just recently 3.76 years, right? To be able to drive that time to degree, and that our native students are now graduating with just 65 hours for their associate's degree. Those are seminal moments for us to be able to celebrate our students. And that we were fortunate with the board's work, as Mr. Alderete mentioned, that we have a $2 million student success fund each year in our budget. That in a sense is our student success venture capital fund. That student success VC fund allowed us, with the board's support, envision, to then leverage our student advocacy centers from 2 colleges that beta tested it, to then take that whole network to all 5 of our colleges. And this was pre-COVID, which then allowed us to impact directly 17,000 students with emergency aid and other supports during COVID. So I think from board policy B91, you can see the multiple ways in which that cascades throughout the organization to really move the needle on student success.
Thank you both so much for sharing that story and for the remarkable success that you were able to share with us today.
Thank you.
Dr. Hellyer and Chair Flickinger, San Jacinto College developed a student success vision with policies and strategies to achieve that vision a number of years ago. And you've received national recognition for the improvement of student outcomes at San Jac. So how have you moved from the original vision into the next phases of your strategic plan and outcomes? And how does your work continue to evolve and develop?
To be honest with you, I must first commend BOTI, because if it wasn't for that, I don't think San Jac would ever be in the position that they are today. To be honest with you, we had no strategic plan until 2010. We had mission and purpose statements, but I don't really know how they were developed. Up to then, the board philosophy had basically been, if we've got enough money to pay the bills, if we have more students than we did a year previous in the same session, then we were doing a great job. We had no interest in data. I don't think it was because we were being stubborn about it. They just had never even really discussed data. That wasn't even on our screen. The board, I think then after going to BOTI around 2006 and 2007, it was kind of a strange event. I remember we were sitting there, they gave us data, and we'd never seen data. And I likened it to being in a dark room, everything, all the lights shut off, and somebody then all of a sudden turned the lights on, and the picture around us was very ugly. We didn't even want to believe, that we were doing that bad a job, because we'd been there kind of fat and sassy thinking we were doing a good job because we were paying the bills and getting more students. Never once did we even consider, were those students being successful? When the board got this new philosophy, it took a little while before I think the administration caught up with us. We kind of had to push for student success. There was a lot of work being done throughout the college, but this wasn't a focused effort. There was no alignment across the college. We had multi-campuses, and those campuses even were in competition with one another. In November 2009, we held a strategic planning retreat with our Achieving the Dream coach, Byron McClinney. That helped the board, along with our chancellor, to get clarity around what was important. One exercise he conducted was having us write on a sticky note what our main #1 goal was. We did this each privately and turned them in. And I'm proud to say that every single one of the board members had student success as their #1 goal. And that's kind of the direction we have been in since then. As a part of our strategic planning process, we worked on alignment, vision, mission, values, and how we would operate strategic goals, and then annual priorities. The actions that were going to be the focus of the new year. The college then worked very hard to make sure that we did work together as one college, not multi-competing campuses. The board approves annual priorities each June, and we ask how these are in alignment with the budgeted resource allocations. Another important part of our strategic plan was requiring and pushing for data. We wanted a calendar and timeline for when data would be ready for the board to review. This led to the creation of a dashboard. We get regular updates on the dashboard components. We have student success presentations at each and every board meeting. One thing we made very evident is that we don't want to just know about the successes. We want to know where we're failing and where we're just doing so-so. We basically told the administration we want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. The board has asked hard questions and is very active in that goal of achieving student success. But again, I want you to know how important BOTI was in this. If it hadn't been for that, I don't think we'd ever turned the corner near as soon as we did.
So Marie talked about that initial planning, and we have moved into the next phase. All along, we were making revisions to our strategic plan and the annual priorities. As pathways came along, we were updating for that, but we went through the next phase in 2018 and 19 of the strategic planning process. And while the board started that original planning process, this time we took it to all the employees. And I'll tell you, the employee engagement throughout both plans has been absolutely critical. It's not the board who's going to implement. It's not me or the other administrators. It is the employees, and they got to buy in. And so we did the buy-in after the board set the goals from the first one, but this time we asked the employees to all work. And this was a college community day where we bring all 1,250 of our full-time employees together, and it's a work day. And in this particular case, they went through the vision and the mission statements. They went through the values, and they said, this works, this doesn't, we're confused by this, we're not making enough progress here. And they made recommendations on how things needed to be changed, and then how our strategies needed to be developed to come forward with our next strategic plan. And from there, we took that feedback also to students. We got student impact, input around it, and then that guided the recommendations that came to the board for the new vision statements, the new mission statements, and the goals. And again, really aligning with that student success focus, but taking it to the next level. And I think one of the things that Marie said was around the data. The data has been absolutely critical. The dashboard, knowing when that data is going to be out there. I remember the meetings when the board's like, why is this so old? We need this more current. Really getting into those conversations and digging through it. And our employees know this is what's on the board topic this month. We need to be looking at this. How do we address it? And so that it's really been clear to employees what's important, but it's also been clear to students what's important. And when the board asks us those hard questions, it's not a matter of pointing fingers. It's a matter of how are we going to solve this together? And that's been really important. Joe talked about the partnership, the board, the administration, the employees. There's no way to do this without everybody having that buy-in and understanding what we're working for. I want to tie this back to the board evaluation. You know, we weren't very good at doing board evaluations there for a few years. I think SAC-COC required it, and that made us like, oh, we're going to start doing this. But that has also turned into being a very valuable process for us. And Marie, will you talk about the board evaluation that just happened this past September and what came out of that from a board standpoint?
I think this last evaluation we did was probably a more sincere evaluation than we've done probably maybe ever since I've been on the board. I think we had gotten to feel a little bit disconnected. Probably this was intensified also because of the COVID. There was no face-to-face meeting, plus COVID responses had become the center point of the meeting, kind of. We had drifted away from some of the things that need to be brought back and back in focus. And I think each one of the board members really did a sincere evaluation of what was going on. We took it home, we looked over it, we didn't do it just during a regular meeting, and just some real good thought went into it. Sometimes I think when things are going well, and I think Sanjak has done a great job, I think we've got great leadership, I think everybody is pretty much on the same page, and things have been going good for us. And I think when that happens, sometimes you're inclined to slack off. You know, you're thinking, hey, we're going good, let's just ride this thing. And I think that's kind of where our board was. And I think our recent evaluation brought us back to our core values of student success. And I think when you think you're doing good, you get a bit complacent. And I think we have to remember that our job on student success will never be done. There's always going to be new challenges and better ways to do it. And I think the board evaluation is a good way to help kind of bring you back to that and get you going on the right track again. And I think that's what happened to us this year.
It really did. It came out with more data that they wanted, looking at that data much more deeply, breaking that data. While we had done race and ethnicity data breakdowns, but really wanting that from a different perspective. And then also wanting to know the why and what are we doing now to address that population that we're really losing, that population in our community we're not getting at all. And so it really has redefined even the board schedule around data and the student success presentations. And again, that focus of the board really taking another level of engagement. Their evaluation, I'll be honest, as a CEO, I was a little scared from it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is taking us to that whole next level. But it was really, again, another way to re-engage us and have us start looking hard at new information. And COVID has impacted our students so much differently than I think any of us ever could have thought. And so what is that next phase around that? And so it was a really good board evaluation. And I wanted to make sure that as trustees and as CEOs, that you really use that as the next growth period of moving your agenda forward. So Martha, that was, I think, our 8 minutes. Uh-oh, I might have been 10 minutes, sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much, Dr. Hellyer and Chair Flickinger. We really do appreciate it. I have one last question to ask our three trustees. What one suggestion or word of advice do you have for all of us in establishing a strategic direction or vision for student success? And I'm going to start with Chair Carrington. What word of advice would you have for us?
Well, it helps to have a president and staff that are passionate about student success. That's key. Secondly, as several have said, you know, don't be afraid to dive into the data. It can be overwhelming. You can be overwhelmed with all the data that you see, and that first picture of it may not be what you expected. It may be pretty ugly, but the board needs to determine what metrics it feels that are important to them to monitor student success and to create an attitude of continuous improvement.
Thank you. Marie?
I think you got to stay laser focused on what your goal is, and also be totally open again to the good, bad, and the ugly of the data. Push for data, ask questions, have a good relationship with your CEO, no playing gotcha games, and get everybody on the same team. I think one of the things that initially kind of threw us was the board felt if we get the administration working with us, then we're going to get this done. But the faculty wasn't really on board in the very beginning. And that was kind of a shock, I think, to a number of us. And you got to get everybody involved, and you got to realize that it's, you know, I've heard people say you can even have the janitors helping out from the top to the bottom. Everybody has to be on board.
Thank you, Marie. Joe Alderete, you have our final word here.
Well, the first thing I would advise every trustee to do is ask smart questions. And then the second thing that's very important is not only does your chancellor, but the whole team has to know as a policymaker that you care about each and every one of them. Your student body has to know that we care about each and every one of them. I think those 3 points will make about any community college successful. And I can tell you, the smartest decision that we've performed by asking smart questions was to get Dr. Mike Flores to be our chancellor. Smart question, smart decision.
That's great. Thank you. So with that, thank you so much, panelists. We've had a question about, can you share your board evaluation policy, process, and instrument? I'm sure that question was for San Jacinto. Dr. Hellyer, I can talk with you on the side. I know the person that asked the question, so we'll follow up with you and Susan Morfontenot.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, thank you. So thanks to our panelists very much. We know that when a board endorses a strategic direction with student success at the core, it provides clarity for the college and the community that you serve. And so, Christy, do you want to put the slides back up? And just want to show you when we're looking at, there's some additional student success statements that are available in the slides. We won't go through them now, but we can share these with you. And as we move to the next slide, just thinking about, when you think about student success statements, that it really provides the picture, a written picture of the future and the why. It encapsulates the reason for the work that you're doing, provides clear direction. And I particularly like this because Joe mentioned this, it helps the college to stand out from competitors. And I think it really does capture that. So with that, if Christy will go to the last slide, and I will turn it back over to Dr. Ferrell.
So I just want to take the last few minutes just to absolutely thank Martha and our panelists. I so appreciate the honesty with which you shared your stories with us today. They're quite inspiring for sure. I was taking notes the whole time. I just so appreciate the work that you're doing to rally your colleges around student success. So I just want to reiterate that these are the kinds of topics that we talk about at the BOTI. We particularly talk about setting the strategic direction for student success and what the role of the board is in doing that. And so you heard today about focused leadership, about articulating expectation, about rallying teams around a common vision. We also talk about monitoring what matters. And so you heard a lot about data and the influence that data has had on them being able to organize their whole organizations around student success and making hard decisions. And then the third one is about creating a culture of change. You saw that in all three stories, how they changed their institutions by really utilizing the role of the board in linking the priorities and allocating and reallocating resources around student success. And lastly, we also talk about in creating a culture of change, the ways that these trustees, I wish we'd had time to talk about this today, we will at the BOTI, the ways that these trustees then had to have the back of the CEO to really enact that kind of change. So more stories to come with the BOTI. So I just thank you so very much, panelists, for sharing your stories. Thank you, Carol Scott, for being with us and for the good work you're doing in leading the Community College Association trustees. And with that, we will conclude our very first in this webinar series for trustees. And I hope we see you next month. If you can switch the slide, please, Christy, to the dates so that folks can see that. You see that we have these upcoming webinars. We already did the January today, and so there you see in February, we'll be talking about the best tools for informed advocacy. Manny Gonzalez will be hosting that one. And then in March, we'll be talking about how how trustees can back career-focused programs. You heard a little bit about that today. In April, then understanding the community college funding model. So maybe you're a new trustee and you want to hear more from the state association on that. That will be coming to you in April. And then lastly, on May 6th, then we will talk about, again, monitoring what matters. We'll dig in a little deeper about the data and what data that we will be talking about. So all of these leading up to June, the June event, where we will be doing a joint CAT and BOTI summer conference. So we'll be looking at some data on May 6th that will help prep you for the work that we're going to be doing in June. So I hope that you'll be able to attend all of these webinars between now and May, leading up to our summer conference. So with that, I'll just say thank you so very much for your time and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
everybody. That was
Have a
awesome.
great
Thank you.
weekend.
That was good. Very
You too.
informative.
Very good.